The Jared Dillian Show.
I'm Jared Dillian. This is The Jared Dillian Show. If you want to call to talk about your money, please call 844-305-7800. That's 844-305-7800. This is The Jared Dillian Show. You can also go to my website, which is jareddillianmoney.com. That's jareddillianmoney.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter at DailyDirtNap. And there's this dude in South Carolina who won $250,000 in the lottery after buying his ticket with $5 in quarters that he vacuumed out of his car. Yeah, that's really it. He vacuumed his car and he had $5 in quarters, so he decided to buy a scratch-off. I should get involved in these scratch-offs. It seems like they win all the time. I don't know. By the way, if you, that's a lot of quarters to find in your car. Like, what are you doing, like, throwing money all over your car? I have, like, the change thing. I don't know if there's a word for it. It's the change thing. Like, it's not like a change compartment. It's the change thing. I have the change thing, and it's full of change, but I don't, like, throw quarters all over the car. Like, I don't know how that happens. Anyway, if you vacuum up $5 in quarters in your car, you are duty-bound to go buy a lottery ticket. You must buy a lottery ticket with that money. That is exactly what it's for. It's found money. There's no other option. No buying a Big Mac. I guess you could buy a Big Mac, but you really should buy a lottery ticket with money that you find out of your car. So, I want to talk a little bit about buying houses, and I want to again, tackle this notion that you're not an adult if you own a house. I've seen a lot of people get hurt by this, and it's not really the case. Like, you can rent. It's really okay to rent. You can rent at any age. It's okay to rent a house, and I think now in particular is probably a pretty good time to rent a house. It's really fine. And I see this with people all the time. They get to be like 27, 28. Man, I'm still renting. I'm just, pissing the money away, and I'm not saving. And, it's really a lot of people. If you do the math on buying a house versus renting, buying a house in all circumstances is more expensive. Always. It's always more expensive to buy a house. You got to do the insurance. You got to do the property taxes. You got to do the HOA. You got to do maintenance. It's always more expensive to buy a house. People do this, and they're kind of stretched when they're renting to begin with. And then they buy a house, and they're like, oh, God, I can't make yeah. So I have a story here from a guy. He's writing for Vice, and he was 24 years old. I'll read some of this. He was 24 years old. He was making $35,000 a year. He was working as an editorial aide at a newspaper. And he bought a 770 square foot, one bedroom condo in Northern Virginia. And this was in 2006 when the housing bubble was on fire. And it was basically he concedes it was basically the worst time to buy a piece of real estate ever. And he says he avoided a subprime loan because he had the backing of his middle-class parents, but that was still a terrible, terrible decision. $35,000 a year. Now, I bought my first house at the same age, making a similar amount of money, and not only that, and paying to go to grad school at the same time. Let's find out why it didn't work out for him. He says, 11 years later, I'm stuck in debt, besieged by bank fees, and unable to get myself out of what is becoming a life-altering real estate blankety-blank. Even as the country recovers from the crash of 2008, the financial crisis is still dragging me down. And that's true for people in a lot of areas of the country. Some areas of the country have rebounded a lot, others haven't. Kind of depends on the property. Looking back, it's easy for strangers to armchair quarterback my path to financial ruin. I obviously wasn't making enough on my own to afford the place, and my career choice, print journalism, has never been known for its robust earning potential. And this was at a time when newspaper jobs were decreasing and digital media jobs were still few in number. Nevertheless, my parents pressed me on the idea of homeownership. I told them I had heard there might be a housing bubble. They brushed it off. By the way, baby boomers always the worst investors. I worried what would happen if I suddenly had to move to another city for work, a very real possibility for someone starting out in newspapers. They told me if I didn't buy then, there was a good chance I'd never be a homeowner. I'm not sure that warning would bother me now, but it spooked me then. Bottom line, I was a 24-year-old being gifted with what seemed like a great opportunity. My parents were going to help me buy a home. Why say no to that? My friend, you should have been listening to the Jared Dillian show. I was wrong. Today I'm still living in the condo, but barely hanging on. I can't sell the place. Mine is one out of about 5.5 million, or nearly 10% of all U.S. mortgages that are currently underwater, meaning I owe more than the property is worth. I'm struggling to stay afloat and taking on a punishing work schedule in a desperate attempt to stick it out and avoid foreclosure. The equity I've built is closing in on the point where it might cover the value of the property lost in the crash, but that's being optimistic. Even after more than a decade forking over interest on a mortgage, the idea of simply breaking even, getting away from this condo with nothing to show for it, sounds like a dream. But I'm worried I won't make it to that point, much less ever get close to owning the place outright. Man, this is really bad. I recognize the privilege I had getting this chance, even as it's backfired on me. While no down payment was required to buy the place, okay. No down payment. Remember what I said. 100% financing, nobody is doing anybody any favors, and this is why. 100% financing, value of the property goes down. I mean, you're underwater from the start. You are underwater from day one. Underwater from the get-go, and this is why. No down payment, 100% financing, you are not doing anybody any favors. He says, my parents did put down a $5,000 deposit that they recouped at closing. My parents also chipped in early with bills with the expectation that I would take over completely within a few years. I mean, this is an unbelievable story. It goes on. I would be fine with foreclosure, even though that would wreck my credit, simply to move on and extricate myself from this mess. But because my parents are also tied up in the purchase, bankruptcy or foreclosure would harm them as well. So with no ability to relocate for better work or lower monthly bills, I press on. So the dude can't even move because he's stuck in the house. He's stuck in this underwater house that he can't sell, and this happened because he got 100% financing. That, number one. And number two, he bought at the top of the bubble, and he probably wouldn't be in this position if he had a 20% down payment. He probably wouldn't be in this position. He said he was a subprime borrower. How is this helping anybody? We're like, oh, we'll put people in the homes. It's one of the dumbest things ever. I needed work that could pay me regularly enough to deal with monthly expenses. So for the past 6 months, I've worked 2 part-time jobs while trying to fit in paid writing assignments where I can. In one stretch this summer, I worked 60 days in a row. That was sufficient to cover exactly what I owe in bills each month. For food and day-to-day expenses, I've essentially been living off the tips I receive at one of my jobs. The problem is unexpected needs here and there, along with the bank hitting me with hundreds in fees, have knocked me off schedule. I'm falling behind on payments. Man, I mean, look, like a lot of this, what happened to this guy, I'll put this away. What happened to this guy is not happening to anybody right now. This was a feature of the housing bubble. We were giving people 100% financing. We were lending people the subprime credit scores. We were letting parents help out. None of this is happening anymore. So that's the good news. There's, my suggestion to this person, the writer of this article, would actually be to stop paying the mortgage and enter the foreclosure process. That would actually be my advice. Stop paying and get out. Or that's one option. Or the other option is do something else that makes more money. Those are your two options. This middle option where you just kind of limp along and like barely make the payments every month, and you can't move and you can't do anything, like that's door number 3. That's a terrible option. So, I'm glad we are out of this. A lot of people got hurt in the financial crisis, and this is an example of how some people got hurt. And there are still, it's been 10, 11 years. There still are some people out there who are still living in houses that are underwater. And by the way, there's a lot of people out there in this situation, and that's kind of the worst aspect of this, is that they're trapped. I'm Jared Dillian. This is The Jared Dillian Show.
The Jared Dillian Show.